Hello, this is Tom from IBM Security Guardium Technical Support Team. In this video, we will talk about Guardium policies. This is the part 1 of the training. Before we start the training, please take a moment to read the disclaimer. In this training, I will start with an overview of Guardium's policies. Next, how SDEP works with the collector's data security policy. Then, we will break down the DSP rule types and their actions, plus explaining the selective audit trail option and its use cases. After that, a quick look at policy management. Then I will do a demo to create a policy from scratch and run database traffic to test the policy. Finally, I will share my considerations for policy implementation. In part 1, I will cover all topics up to the demo part 1. Let's get started. If we're talking about policies in Guardium, different features support different policies. The most common one is Database Activity Monitoring Policy, or DAM policy for short. DAM policy has two types. One is Data Security Policy, the standard DAM policy, and this is our training's focus today. The other is Session Level Policy, which we may cover in future training. The screenshot in the middle shows a new policy creation wizard, which displays the types of DAM policies. There are other policies too, like a classification policy, which supports sensitive data discovery. Then there is a File Activity Monitoring, also called FAM policy, for tracking file-related activities, but we don't discuss them today. That's a quick overview of the policy types. Next, we will dive deeper into the data security policy. The definition. A data security policy is a set of ordered rules and actions applied in real time to the database traffic observed by a Guardium collector. The database traffic can come from SDEP, external SDEP, universal connector, etc. The screenshot on the right shows a typical data security policy with ordered rules. Each rule defines specific criteria, and these criteria fall into three main categories. First, session-level criteria, things like DB type, DB user, server IP, client IP, source program, etc. Second, SQL level criteria, such as SQL commands, fields, and database objects. Third, other supplementary criteria like reset interval and time period. One key point, each rule must be configured with at least one action. It also supports multiple actions if needed. The actions are grouped into logging, ignoring actions, alerting actions, and blocking actions. Next, let's revisit the classic diagram. It shows in case SDEP agent captures the traffic, how SDEP works with collectors' data security policies. First, SDEP is installed on the database server. It waits to intercept the database traffic and send to the collector. In a typical scenario, a user uses a DB client to connect to the DB server and send SQL command. These are called database requests. Then, the database server sends response packets back to the DB client. Those responses could be login failures, if login fails, SQL errors, if the SQL fails, or result sets if the SQL succeeds. At the same time, SDEP forwards all these request and response packets to the collector for processing. The collector's sniffer component will analyze, parse, and log the data based on the installed policy. And depending on which policy actions are triggered, the collector may send control signals back to SDEP, like ignore signals, blocking signals, or reject patterns. To handle the DB traffic efficiently, data security policies have different rule types for different database packets. Access rules work on database request packets. those sent from the DB client to the DB server. Exception rules work on DB exceptions, like SQL errors and login failures. Extrusion rules work on SQL result sets. Let's do a quick recap of what we just covered. There are 3 DSP rule types: access rule, exception rule, and extrusion rule. In this screenshot, you can see these 3 rule types in the dropdown, the blue rectangle. Note that you may see 4 other rules in the dropdown. These are for mainframe traffic, so we won't cover them today. Another reminder, if you check DSP rule types on a collector, extrusion rule isn't shown by default. By default, the collector receives the result sets but does not process them. To enable extrusion rule, you need to turn on both inspect returned data and log records affected for the collector's sniffer. Keep in mind, result sets are much larger than SQL statements, so enabling returned data inspection could impact the sniffer's performance. That's why these options are off by default. We just covered the rule types. Now let's move to rule actions. When database traffic matches a rule's criteria, the policy action triggers. Actions decide how much data is collected and logged. Rule actions fall into 4 categories. First, login actions. Common ones are log full details and log masked details. They either log the full SQL as is or mask full SQL's values with question marks. Second, ignoring actions. Session-level ignore actions can cut down the traffic the collector receives. Skip logging is special. It skips logging SQL constructs or exceptions. Third, alerting actions. Most alert actions generated both policy violation and alert notifications. The exceptions are alert only, just the alert notifications, and log only, just the policy violations. Fourth, blocking actions, which need an advanced DAM license. We don't cover blocking actions in this training. For more details about what each rule action does exactly, please refer to Knowledge Center page. Next, let's talk about an important DSP policy's advanced option, Selective Audit Trail. It defines the default login behavior for SQL statements. This option is off by default, so it's a non-selective audit trail policy. With this non-selective audit, only SQL constructs, which are SQL statements with values replaced by question mark, are logged. As the screenshot shows, the second delete runs 3 times and the third runs 9 times in 1 session per hour, respectively. And by default, with non-selective audit trail, all SQL constructs are logged, even if no rules with logging actions exist. Its benefit? It doesn't miss any SQL constructs, meeting the key auditing requirements while avoiding excessive logging. On the flip side, Selective Audit Trail logs no SQL by default. With Selective Audit Trail on, to log SQLs, you must explicitly add access rules with logging actions for the SQLs you need. Otherwise, they won't be logged at all. The benefit of Selective Audit Trail is that it cuts down unnecessary logging to the collector. Only traffic matching the login rules gets logged. I've put together a table to compare non-selective and selective audit trail policies and when to use which. First, the defaults they share. Both log session information and database exceptions by default. Result sets only get logged if you explicitly set up extrusion rules. The key difference is in second column, highlighted in bold. SQL statement logging. Non-selective audit trail logs all SQL constructs by default. Selective audit trail logs no SQL by default. As for use cases, non-selective is for when you need to audit all data. Selective works when auditing requirements are clear and most traffic is not of interest. If you're not sure which one to pick, a good rule of thumb: start with the default, the non-selective audit trail. We've covered several points about policy rules. Let's move on to policy management. Here are the key points you need to know. First, a policy must be installed on the collector for its rules and actions to take effect. Guardium allows multiple policies installed on one collector, and the rules are processed one after another in sequence. For example, you could install one policy with 20 rules or two policies with 10 rules each. As long as the ultimate sequence of the rules is the same, both setups work the same. To use a single policy or split one big policy to multiple policies, the main and only consideration here is ease of maintenance. It's up to your decision. Now, how does rule processing work? If a rule's criteria are met and its action triggers, processing stops. No more rules are checked for that database traffic unless you've checked the continue to next rule option. If that's checked, the traffic will move on to test against the next rule. But note, continue to next rule only applies when access rules follow access rules or exception rules follow exception rules. It doesn't work if an exception rule comes after an access rule or vice versa. This is easy to understand. Exception rule applies to response packets, while access rule applies to request packets. They are different. One more important point. If you make any changes to a currently installed policy, like updating groups, criteria, or actions, you have to reinstall the policy on the collector for the changes to take effect. A good practice is to schedule daily policy reinstallations to cover any potential changes automatically. Next, I will demo creating a data security policy from scratch. This will include both access rule and exception rule with typical logging, ignoring, and alerting actions. And I split the demo into two parts. In part 1, I will focus on creating the policy, and part 2, I will focus on generating traffic and verifying the policy works. Okay, let's go to demo part 1. This is the policy design diagram I will use for the demo. You can pause and take a look, and then we will get started. Okay, let's start the demo video. First task, we need to create a test policy and configure the policy rules as per the policy design diagram. I'm currently logged into the Central Manager's GUI. First, let me quickly review the Central Management page. You can see we have an aggregator and a collector registered. Both of them have the default ignore policies installed, but only the one installed on the collector will take effect because aggregator does not have a sniffer component. To find the policy builder, you locate the policy builder for data. So this is the policy builder for data, the main page. You can see the default policies are installed, and you can check it is installed on which collector. By the way, if you click the question mark on the upper right corner, it will bring you the relevant knowledge center page. For example, you are currently at the policy builder, then it will bring you the policies related knowledge center page. So this is a central place for all the policy related content. For example, the rule types, categories, continue to next, session level policies, rule actions, rule criteria, etc., etc. So if you are new to the content, then you can spend some time to read them through. Okay, if we want to create a new policy, you need to click the new button. So this is the create new policy wizard. So first you need to decide the type of the policy. We have the data security policy. The other two are session level policy, but we will focus on data security policy. So I just keep the data security policy type. And we need to provide a name. I name it a demo Indian user group policy. For the category, this is an optional field. If you expand the advanced option, you will find the selective audit trail. So this one is unchecked by default. I will just keep the default, so it is a non-selective audit trail policy. If I expand the rules, then I can see the rules section. If I want to add new rules, then I need to click the new button. So first you need to decide the rule type. If you click the drop down, you will see the access, exception, and extrusion. This is because I'm on a central manager. For the other 4 types, those are ZOS related. Just remember, if you are on a collector, then you must select the inspector return the data and the log records affected. Otherwise, you won't see the extrusion rule type. So let's revisit the design diagram. First, 3 failed logins with 3 minutes from 1 user, then trigger an alert. It's about the failed login, so the rule type needs to be exception rule type, right? We need to prepare a proper name. I just name it rule 1, 3 consecutive failed login. Because the rule generates alert, so I set the severity to be medium. This is the rule criteria section. You can see there are 3 categories: session level, SQL level, and other criteria. Because I want to focus on each individual database user, so I need to locate the database user criteria. And in order to evaluate against each individual database user, I need to select equal to operator and put a dot in the value field. So it will count each individual database user. For the exception rules SQL criteria, the exception type you need to select from the drop-down list. In this case, I need to select the login failed. And the minimum count and reset interval are defined in other criteria. First, I need to define the minimum count to be 3. And then the reset interval needs to be 3 minutes. Okay, 3 minutes. So 3 failed logins in 3 minutes. Okay. For the action, I plan to use the alert per match. So when the traffic comes in that triggered the rule, then I will generate alert. For alert action, you also need to define the notification type and the message template. Because syslog notification type is always available, then I will choose the syslog notification. So I have the first exception rule defined. The second rule is to evaluate if the session info matches the trusted connection profiling list. If so, then ignore step session. So this needs to be an access rule. I will name it rule 2. Rule 2, ignore trusted connections. Because it's ignoring trusted connection is informational only. So I keep the severity as information. Next, I need to define the session level criteria. For ignore step session, you need to define session level criteria only. Okay, this time I plan to use multiple attributes as a tuple. So this is a tuple attribute. It consists of 5 criteria like application, database user, server IP, service name, etc. So for tuple group, I need to use in group. And for the group selection, I want to use the one that I created for this demo. So if you click the pencil icon, it will open that group that you selected so that you can take a look at the members. So you can see I have 5 members added in this group. By the way, I added those members based on a predefined report called connection profiling list. I identified those sessions to be trusted, so I don't want to monitor them. So if you want to add additional connection later, you can add members and then you can input each attribute accordingly, and it will combine them as a tuple member. Okay, next I need to select the action, which is ignore step session. Click OK. The second rule is ready. Ignore trusted connection, and the action is ignore step session. The third one is the DB server from demo privileged DB user group. If yes, then log full detail. Also, continue to next the rule. So this is for the third rule. Need to evaluate against the DB user. Let's add a new rule with access rule type. So I will name it rule number 3. It's easier to identify. Rule 3, privileged DB users log full activities. So for the rule criteria, remember we want to focus on DB user. It is also a session level criteria. So we need to locate the database user from the dropdown. And this time we need to check against the group. I defined the group before the demo. It is called the demo privileged DB users. Similarly, we can check the pencil icon to view the members. There are just 2 members, a can test MS SQL and a can test Oracle. So for each database, I created a test DB user. Okay, so the criteria is done. Then next, we need to define the action. This time it's a logging action, log full details for privileged DB user. Click OK. The third one is ready. By the way, we must enable the continue to next, right? As per the design, we need to enable continue to next for third rule. The fourth rule, to evaluate against the command and sensitive object. And if it satisfies the rule, then trigger 2 actions, alert per match and log masked detail. Let's create the fourth rule. It's also an access rule. And rule 4, sensitive object alert and log masked details. Because it generates alert, I set the severity to be high. And rule criteria, this time is against the DML and the sensitive object. Both of them are SQL criteria. So I need to locate the criteria from the SQL criteria section. So first is the command. We want to evaluate if the command matches the DML command group. So this is the group I created by cloning the predefined DML commands predefined group. You can customize the group as needed. So I just made sure it has the insert, update, delete. Those are the DML I'm interested in. And next, I need to add another sensitive object, right? Then I need to select the object criteria. So object in group, and also I need to select a group that has been created in advance. It is called demo sensitive objects. You can see the members. I added 4 members. By the way, the member value supports wildcard. So it's useful if you know the keyword of the sensitive object, but you don't know the full name. You don't want to miss any sensitive object with that keyword, then you can put the wildcard. It is a percentage sign. It's also useful if the object appears as a schema.object name, then by putting a wildcard, it will help you capture that object name. Because I will generate alert per match, and which will generate a policy violation. Because the SQL would be related to sensitive object, by default, the full SQL will show up in the policy violation. If I don't want to see the full SQL, I want to mask the SQL, then I need to change to log masked SQL in policy violation. This is defined in the other criteria. Okay. Finally, I need to add the two actions. First is the alert per match. I need to define the message template, the default, and the notification type, syslog. Okay. And finally, another action is log masked detail. So the value will be replaced by question mark. So click OK. So the fourth rule is created. As of now, we have defined all the four rules, one exception rule, and then access rule to ignore trusted connection, access rule to log full detail for privileged DB user activity, and the last rule to alert on activities on sensitive objects DML. What if the traffic doesn't satisfy any rule criteria? What is the login behavior? The answer is it is decided by the selective audit trail option. So we're using the non-selective audit trail policy. So for traffic that doesn't meet any of the rule, then it will by default log the SQL construct. Okay. So the new policy has been created successfully. Remember that if we want to use the policy, we need to install it, right? You can see currently it's not installed anywhere. Then if we want to install the policy, we have two methods. The first is that we can install it from the central manager. You can see the central manager has two collectors, right? So from the central manager, it can install the policy into the collector. Another method is to install directly from the collector itself. So this is the collector's GUI page. If I go to the policy builder, you can see currently it has the default ignore policy installed. And before installing policy, let me verify if there are live traffic coming in. Yes, there are live traffic coming from two steps. Now, let me go back to the central manager. If I want to install from the central manager, I just need to select the policy and click the install. Similarly, if I want to install the policy from the collector locally, it's the same policy builder page, and I just need to select the policy and click the install button. The only difference is that if you install from the central manager, let me demo the installation from the central manager. If you install from central manager, you need to select the specific collector and the install action, and then click OK. So installing policy from central manager is very common. So after installation, you can see this one is installed on which collector. And let me double check from the collector's policy builder. You can see the status is reflected immediately. So currently, this collector has this demo policy installed. If you want to view the installed policy, there is another GUI page. Currently installed policies. You can see the details by checking the View Details report. This is the policy details, but you can see there are 5 records. This is because the fourth rule defined 2 actions, so each action takes 1 row. If you scroll to the right, you will be able to view more details about the installed policy. Okay, that's everything I wanted to cover in part 1 of the training. In part 2, I will walk you through the demo part 2, which will show you how to verify the policy is working properly. Please don't forget to view part 2 of the training. Thank you very much.